Episode 151 of CppCast with guest JeanHeyd Meneide, recorded May 21st, 2018. This episode of CppCast is sponsored by PVS Studio, one of the most powerful static analyzers for your C, C++, and C# source code. PVS Studio will let you detect errors and potential vulnerabilities at the earliest stage. Try the demo version today at viva64.com. In this episode, we discuss some of the CPP Now trip reports. Then we talk to JeanHeyd Meneide, author of the sol2 library. JeanHeyd talks to us about sol2 and the paper he'll be presenting at Rapperswil. Welcome to episode 151 of CppCast, the only podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, how you doing today?
I am all right, Rob. You know, you just said episode 151, and it made me think of when I was all like, episode 88 miles per hour, and that was a long time ago at this point.
I know. It's been, over 50 episodes now since episode 100. That one seemed like such a big deal, and it was just a year ago now.
Yeah, and we're nowhere near those podcasts that have like 3,000 episodes or whatever.
Yeah, well, at one a week, we have a ways to go until we get into really big numbers. Yeah.
Hopefully we'll be retired by then.
Yeah. Well, at the top of our episode, I'd like to read a piece of feedback. This week, we got a tweet. We got a couple tweets. This one is from @TWMatrim. And, last week we were talking about the freestanding proposal with Ben Craig, and this tweet was in response to that saying, I wonder if this could have been useful for something like Include OS, or do they have their own subset of things they support? And I'm wondering if this is something we talked about when we had Alfred on to discuss Include OS. Like, did we talk about how much of the STL an Include OS program could use? I feel like that may have come up.
We did talk about it, and it can use the STL, and I know that they had to do things like some bootstrapping stuff, like provide their own new and delete.
And I guess the question is, were they using the STL, or did they have to write their own STL in order to
No, I'm sure they're using it, because I have played with it. They're using the standard one that ships with Clang, but it is a very interesting question as to what exactly they had to do and what they have to limit. I think their goal was to provide enough of an operating system so that they didn't have to really limit what you were doing.
Right.
But how exactly they accomplished that is a different question.
Maybe we should check up on Alfred. It's been a while since we first talked about Include OS. I'm curious to see how they're doing now.
It has been a while, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show as well. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. Joining us today is JeanHeyd Meneide. The PhD, known in meatspace as JeanHeyd, is a computer science undergraduate at the Fu Foundation School of Engineering in Columbia University. They are currently working on open source C++ and C++ standardization projects, as well as exploring graphics programming. They're currently dabbling with Haskell and Elm for fun and are attempting to wrangle their biggest open source project, sol2, into a newer, better version of itself. The nickname is a stood promise on their stood future. JeanHeyd, welcome to the show.
Hey, Rob and Jason. It's fantastic to be here.
I'm curious about the Fu Foundation School for Engineering.
Yes.
The name strikes me as interesting. Like, do you know what the history of that name is?
I actually have no clue.
Okay.
I've wondered about it a couple times myself. I feel like I should ask somebody, but I haven't. I have not checked in about it. I just know that it's a mouthful sometimes to say the full thing.
It is. And that's fine. It just struck me as curious.
Oh, yeah. I mean, most universities have like a rich, deep history about their founding members and who donated buildings and everything like that. I just unfortunately do not know it.
That's true, for sure.
Okay. Well, JeanHeyd, we have a couple news articles to discuss. Feel free to comment on any of these, and we'll start talking more about sol2, okay?
Oh, yeah, awesome.
Okay. So this first one, Jason, I might need you to explain this one. The superconstructing super eliter post.
Yes. So this is, okay. If you want to put an element in a standard container, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to have to perform a move.
Okay.
And this is about techniques for avoiding that move and constructing the thing in place in a way such that it can exploit in place back. And this 100% directly dovetails with the talk that I gave at C++ Now. And it was a technique that I did not even consider that involves using implicit conversions with callables that can be used to directly emplace a type from a generator function, basically. Really interesting idea. And I can just do hand-wavy things for as far as, what our audience can see here. But consider a callable with an implicit conversion that can be used with in place back effectively.
Yeah, this is one of those ones that's a little hard to discuss in too much detail without showing code.
Yes.
It's a little dense, I guess, as far as what they're trying to do here. But I think the core idea is that because mplaceback, basically constructs a t, the value that they pass that t can essentially accept anything that's convertible to that t, because it's essentially trying to construct it in place, right? So
right.
The whole idea is that if you pass, this struct of something that has this conversion operator, this implicit conversion operator, it can basically call your function at the right time and basically get you this, very clean construction that will avoid, too much overhead or copies or moves or any of that.
Right, and we're taking advantage of return value optimization and such. The thing will basically be constructed in place with a generator function.
Yes. And
go ahead.
Oh yeah, and I guess the whole point of that, it makes it generator functions, I guess, are a lot more general than say the constructor that you might use or whatever, and so it makes it kind of very useful, to very efficiently construct what you need and do it with the minimal amount of overhead. This is something that actually kind of applies to sol2, I guess. And maybe when we talk about sol2 later, I can kind of dovetail a little bit on this.
Absolutely. If you've got ideas for how that would apply. I would just wish that I had been aware of this when I presented in Aspen 2 weeks ago, because I would have used an example from this for sure.
Well, it's worth pointing out that the author of this post is Arthur Dwyer. I think we've mentioned a couple times before on the show. He got this idea based on an earlier post where he was, I guess, suggesting that, hey, the standard library should have this alternative way of emplacing into a container. And then he realized that, you could do this trick based on someone else's post.
Yeah, and if I might go in for just a second more detail, moves generally are not free. Anything that is not trivially movable, the move is not going to be free. And a lot of the examples that I used were with the result of make shared. And the result of make shared is a shared pointer with in place back has to be moved into place. There's no way to construct it in place. But with this technique, you could call make shared and in place it in place and not have to do any kind of move or copy on it.
Right. Okay, so then we also have several C++ Now trip reports. And this first one is from Matt Butler, and it was his first time at the conference, both as an attendee and as a speaker. And I thought this was a pretty good post from that perspective.
Yeah, and Matt's one of my, comes to my meetup, so right. I know Matt.
Yeah, he mentioned that I think Charlie gave him some help in writing his proposal, and I guess Charlie is another regular attendee of your meetup, right?
Yes, Charlie is also in the Denver area.
Yeah, and I think his session was on secure coding practices, right?
Yes.
Either of you get to attend that one?
I did not.
I got to attend part of it,
Okay.
mostly the scary part where he actually used an exploit to get into a machine, which was, so I got to get spooked, basically, for the part that I saw.
Yeah, he talks a little bit about that, and he mentions that it's not something that would really be something you need to worry about on a modern day machine. It's kind of an older exploit that he showed because he didn't want to, put a video out showing someone how to do an exploit that would affect a kind of present day modern machine. But it sounds like an interesting talk. I'm looking forward to watching the video when those go up.
Yeah, I missed it twice because he practiced it at my meetup, and then I wasn't able to attend it in Aspen.
Oh, that's too bad.
Well, thankfully, there are the videos that C++ Now puts up and all that fun stuff. So if you did miss something, you kind of get to go back and see what you missed and all that good stuff.
And that is not a news item that we have for this week, but they are starting to post the videos.
Oh, great. They have the keynotes up so far?
At least the opening and closing keynote, and I think some other talks are up.
Yeah, I'm actually the student volunteer sort of in charge of putting that all together.
Oh, okay.
So keynote and both keynotes are up, and I believe 3 additional videos are up on the YouTube channel called BoostCon, and so I think Odin Holmes, Arthur O'Dwyer's an allocator as a handle to a heap, and a few others are present there. I actually didn't get to see Odin's talk, so I already watched the video. It was actually pretty interesting. But yeah, so the videos are starting to slowly come up, and I think it'll be over about the course of the next month. All the videos will be kind of popping up and showing up, and as that gets updated, I'll be kind of throwing them on I'll be throwing any slides that get sent to me and any videos that pop up. I'll be throwing them on the CPP Now Presentations 2018 GitHub, so that people can kind of have an easy way to access them. But I'm sure that all the interesting videos are going to get thrown up on like Reddit and stuff and shared around that way, or at least spiral around the Twitterverse and stuff like that.
That reminds me, I owe you some slides.
Yes, yeah. So if you're listening to this and you're a person who spoke at C++ Now, please send your slides to speaker-files@cppnow.org, so I can be done.
I will attempt to remember to do my part as soon as we get off the interview.
Okay, next one, another trip report. This one is from Ben Dean, who we've, of course, had on the show before and has done joint presentations with you, Jason.
Yes.
And he's talked about a couple of his favorite talks, including one of yours, Jason.
Oh, yeah, he did mention my talk, yes. I did do something a bit different this year, a little bit different, and I made it much more like how I actually teach than a regular presentation that was geared specifically for, kind of YouTube presentation. And I think it was pretty well received. But I think more interesting is, Ben is very modest about his talks, and he just kind of mentions that his talk went well or whatever. But Ben did win Best Presentation this year. Again, that's 2 years in a row for Ben.
It's awesome. Congratulations to Ben.
Yes.
Yeah, his talk was really good, and everybody who talked about it, said it was amazing and all of that. So if you have a chance, you should probably watch it on YouTube and all that stuff, because it's probably going to be very, very enlightening and very good. Because he kind of goes over some very, very useful, well-founded ideas and fundamentals, and just kind of goes over those. So it's not like, the latest and greatest and all the crazy things you can use, but he kind of talks about a very stable, useful, declarative style of C++ that is kind of can get you very far, as far as, the things that you're working on.
Okay. One other thing that Ben called out regarding your talk, Jason, is your presentation style. He said you started embedding Compiler Explorer into your presentation, and I think someone else in one of these reports mentioned it too. I was wondering if you want to talk about that.
It's a thing that I do now. I ended up implementing this because of my teaching style, but I've decided basically every code sample is, for lack of a better word, it's a teachable moment. So I try to make all of my code samples fully compilable, and not always 100% able to accomplish that. But I can click on any code sample and it'll just be immediately replaced with a inline Compiler Explorer window.
That's awesome.
And then we can go from there and discuss what the example is doing.
Very cool. Okay, the next one is another trip report. Who is the author of this one? It's bunnyladame.blogspot. I'm trying to find the name of the author, though.
Yes.
Her name is Eva.
Yes.
But she goes by, I guess, Bunny, online. Much like I kind of run around with the nickname ThePhD more than my real name.
Right, and I think we talked about her. We talked about her other trip report when she first went to CppCon.
Yes.
This is another kind of first-timer perspective trip report.
Right, exactly. This is, her kind of follow-up, if you will, from CppCon.
Yeah, and I guess she wasn't even expecting to go until Ben told her about it, and it sounds like she really enjoyed it, if not as much as, or maybe even more so than CppCon.
It's a great conference. Everyone should go. I mean, that is until the tickets sell out, which is 150 people each year.
Right. And then another one we have, this one is from Matt Godbolt, and he had an interesting time with CPP now because he wasn't really planning on going until he realized he had some time off in between jobs. So he was just going to show up and maybe give a lightning talk until John Kolb talked him into giving a talk at the last minute.
Yes.
So how was Matt's talk, guys?
I had a ton of fun in Matt's talk. I didn't write a trip report. JeanHeyd did, which is the next trip report, so I guess I'll let you talk about Matt's talk.
Okay, so I was there for some of Matt's talk, and I got to see and listen to him kind of explain a lot of the behavior behind the compiler and how it optimizes things. He spent a lot of time actually talking about virtual functions and how powerful devirtualization is, but how very few cases can actually apply. And so you have to be careful when you're using that stuff. And he kind of really went through, this is the assembly it generates, this is what your compiler does for you, this is the work it does behind the scenes to really take your C code or your C++ code and actually make it useful and fast. And the different things that inhibit or enable your compiler to kind of really make these amazing optimizations. And it was really eye-opening for me because it wasn't just like these are the optimization it does. He kind of went through a lot of the assembly as well, and it was very, very I felt like just by watching this talk I learned a lot more about assembly than I would in a traditional assembly class, which was kind of fantastic. So seeing his talk actually makes me want to go get my own compiler explorer on my computer so I can do more disassembly, because a lot of the things I do are kind of benchmarks and stuff. That's kind of like what I like doing. So I would totally love to, take a lot of what I learned in his talk and apply it to what I've got and see if I can, dig a little deeper in some of the topics that I'm looking at. But yeah, no, his talk was fantastic. I can definitely see he put a lot of effort into it, and that it's like very, very polished, very wonderful kind of walkthrough.
Yeah, and if you have any questions at all about like what partial or speculative devirtualization means and what it can do, that's definitely the thing that I learned the most about from his talk.
Okay. And yeah, as you mentioned, Jason, this last trip report is from our guest tonight, JeanHeyd. And in addition to your talk, which we'll dive into more in a moment, about sol2, you also gave 2 lightning talks. Is that right?
Yeah. So this is actually a funny story. I wasn't planning on giving any lightning talks. But so I was sitting, giving out name tags at registration, and Michael Case, who attends these conferences and organizes lightning talks and various other things for the conference, and works with Boost and BoostCon and all that other stuff. He was kind of having a conversation near me, and he was like, and he was just talking to somebody, and then he like calls out to me, and he's like, "And you're giving a lightning talk, right?" Like in the middle of his conversation, and I was like, yeah. And he's like, "You're giving it on Monday, right?" And so we're doing registration on Sunday. Monday is like is much less than 24 hours away. And I'm like, yeah, a talk on Monday. Yeah, a lightning talk. Yeah. And he's like, "You're going to be there." And I'm like, totally going to be there. Yeah. I had nothing planned. I had it was just, I shouldn't have agreed, but I totally did. And I kind of threw myself under the bus there. No idea what I was going to do. No idea how I was going to handle it. So to kind of, and this is where I bad idea meets worse idea, right? So after registration, I sent him an email, and rather than saying, "Listen, it was just a joke, just kind of playing along with the conversation," don't actually. Instead, what I sent him was, "I want to give 2 lightning talks." 'Cause at this point, I don't. I think it's because I had my first drink, at the bar there. Basically, I went back to my room and I was like, you know what? I'm going to get back in, because there's no way he's going to approve me giving 2 lightning talks, right? That's like, no, who does that, right? So I sent him an email. I'm going to give 2 lightning talks. And he agrees for me to give 2 lightning talks. So now I have a scheduled lightning talk on Monday and one on Wednesday, and I have to do both. And so that's how I ended up doing a lightning talk. That's how I ended up giving a lightning talk. 2 lightning talks. And the talk I went there for. Oh, boy.
Well, and if I have the story right, when you first applied as a student volunteer, you didn't even assume that you were going to be giving a talk at all.
No, so yeah, that was part of it too, right? So I kind of dug myself in a hole. Right? I had expectation to give 0 talks, and then I gave 3. So the story was that is I applied to the story actually goes, and I have a little bit about it, I guess, on the blog. That's, I guess, going to be linked. I was kind of approached about being a student volunteer in general, I think first by Simon Brand. He, I was kind of in the CP Lang Slack, and I was just kind of, whatever, talking about C++ and everything. And he sees that I'm a student, and he says, "You should apply to be a student volunteer." And I'm like, yeah, maybe. No, not really. And then, while I'm in the CP Lang Slack, I see this channel called Stud Text WG, or Standard Text Working Group. Or, it's in a formal text working group, basically, of a bunch of people who attend C++ committee meetings, and what they want to do is, improve Unicode and everything, right? So I joined that group. I, kind of involved myself more than I should. You're starting to see the common theme here of me getting more involved than I should. And I gave a presentation about some of the Unicode work I did, right? It wasn't very extensive or everything, but I gave a presentation. I said, this is, the Unicode abstraction I made for these people. This is kind of the design decision. These are the design decisions I made, and a bunch of other things. And, after that presentation, Mark Zarin, who works at VMware, and who also goes to my local C++, meetup, contacted me and said, "Hey, you gave a really great presentation. You should be a student volunteer." And at the same time, also, Jason kind of has always been the kind of pushing and poking me, like, "Hey, you should present about sol2 somewhere and talk about it and stuff," right? So there's 3 different people kind of all poking me, like, "Hey, you should, do something at a conference or whatever," right? And so eventually, after Mark Zarin and kind of talked to me, I was like, okay. So I just kind of threw up an application to student volunteer. I made it look clean. I didn't just I wasn't lazy about it. I presented, everything I had. I talked about the presentation I've done and all that fun stuff. And so then Bryce Lobach, Addleston, I believe his last name, contacts me, by Slack, and he says, "You know what? I'll let you be a student volunteer on the condition that you give a talk." And I'm like, sure, I guess, why not? What's the worst that could happen? And he, before I know it, he sent an email and he's like, "Hey, I tricked JeanHeyd into giving a talk. You two," and he sent the email, he CC'd John Calbon, and he was like, "You and JeanHeyd work out, the talk and everything you're going to do." And I was like, all right, I guess I'm really in this. Okay, I'm giving a talk. And that's how that happened. So, yeah, totally in over my head. So I gave a talk about sol2, and I gave the 2 lightning talks, and yeah.
So I was going to say, so it was over the head as you felt you were. Did you enjoy giving all these talks?
I did enjoy giving the talks. So as much as I, like to say that I maybe committed too much, I totally had fun doing every single one of them. One of the lightning talks, the Wednesday lightning talk, was about my proposal to the C++ Standards Committee called Stud Embed, which I guess we'll talk about later. The first one was actually kind of a non-technical, touchy-feely-ish kind of talk. And then, I had, my actual real meaty 90-minute, why am I up here, oh God, talk, on sol2. And that was that. So actually, now that I'm thinking about it, about the in over my head thing, I actually didn't plan to give a presentation for the Unicode thing either. I kind of got involved with the group and I mentioned I did work, and then Tom Honerman, who runs kind of the Unicode working group that is now officially SG16, which is, it's been a blast kind of going from informal working group to real like SG16 recognized committee with our own mailing list and everything. We feel so official now. I actually was not going to give a presentation, but Tom sent out like a meeting invite for like the next meeting, and he was like, JeanHeyd Meneide is going to present about his Unicode abstraction. I was like, I'm not sure I agreed to sign up for this, but I didn't say anything. I totally gave a presentation. So a lot of this is, I was trying to see a pattern here.
And I've gone back and forth with Phil Nash on, who has given the most talks relative to how many talks we submitted. And considering you submitted 0 talks and gave, at this rate, 4, I guess, if you win percentage-wise, for sure.
I mean, 4 over 0 is like, what, that's undefined or infinite.
That's infinity, yeah.
Jeez. Yeah,
okay. No, go ahead.
Yeah, and speaking about talks, I guess I've also, I was trying to like let the deadline for CppCon pass and be like, oh darn, I'm at C++ now and I can't submit a talk. Darn it! Would it be a shame if if only I had more time, I would totally submit a talk. And then John Kalb said, if you're here at C++ now, you get an extra week to submit your talk to CppCon. So I was like, oh. Great. So I submitted a talk. I don't know if it's going to be accepted. I kind of hope it doesn't, so I can take a nap. But I mean, I'm totally bought in at this point, right? Maybe next year I'll kind of like take it easy, but at this point, I mean, I'm totally in the bucket for giving talks and everything. So that's just how it goes now.
I wanted to interrupt the discussion for just a moment to bring you a word from our sponsors. Development of qualitative software is impossible without the use of static code analysis tools. These tools enable you to detect code vulnerabilities and ridiculous typos. By the way, many developers tend to underestimate the typos issue. That's why we suggest reading the article, The Evil Within the Comparison Functions. One of the most powerful static analyzers is PVS Studio. This tool detects errors and potential vulnerabilities in the source code of programs written in C, C++, and C#. It works in Windows, Linux, and macOS environments, and it conveniently and easily integrates into the Visual Studio IDE versions 2010 to 2017. Try the demo version of PVS Studio and find errors in the code of your project today.
Well, since we've talked all those things around your presentation and what you talked about, I guess let's backtrack a little bit. Tell the audience what sol2 is. All
right. So sol2 is an experiment that went too far, basically. So it Sol, I mean, it wasn't really called sol2, it was just called Sol, and that was, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago. I was just starting in school. A person named Danny Y, his online handle is Raps, and he created Sol. And his goal for creating and using Sol was not like anything related to like making Lua bindings better or anything like that. He just wanted to, he had a small goal to use Lua to make a very small like pseudo build system that could fit on a thumb drive for some students he was working with at a university. And Danny, I guess to explain, Danny isn't actually a programmer by trade. He is actually an oncologist. He's like a super genius PhD, which is what I hope to be one day. But he's actually like an MD. He's like a medical doctorate, PhD. He's fully in that field. And he's just an amazing programmer for fun. So he made sol2, and I found it, and I decided that I would just start making it better, with or without his consent. And so I totally made a lot of pull requests to the repository. The binding that he made, the Sol binding, which, just glue between C++ and Lua, grew and grew. And then after a while, he kind of got busy because, he's an oncologist. He's like actually, like handling cancer patients and everything, right? And doing research. So, he's busy. I decided that I would kind of step in and, just help. As much as I could. And one of my pull requests kind of sat there and got bigger and bigger and bigger. And at one point I decided, you know what, I'm gonna break this off and make sol2 since he seems, busy, very, very busy. So I broke it off and I made sol2, and I kind of just became, Sol's, curator and, maintainer. And so that's kind of how Sol2 spawned into being and became the thing. And then after that, I kind of just kept on working on it, kept on trying to make, what would be the most glorious interface for a binding that I could do, right? That was the driving force behind developing Sol2. And it wasn't actually about performance or anything else, but it kind of spiraled off into being about that. When I saw people starting to actually use Sol2 seriously and try to use it in an industry and do benchmarks with it, and I'm fiercely competitive. So when I saw other frameworks beating mine in these benchmarks, I kind of started working a lot harder than I initially did, and so it became like a real thing. But yeah, that is Sol2. Sol2 is a C++ Lua binding that turned into a very successful project, open source project. Not necessarily overnight, but it happened, and now I'm here.
So I'm curious what actually got your very first interest in the project. Like, how did it come on your radar in the first place?
So at the time, there was this group called The Lounge, or The Lounge C++, and The Lounge C++ was originally, for me, a Stack Overflow chat room group. And the group basically included me and a bunch of other people, and part of that group was Raps. And so he talked about, Sol while he was there, and that's kind of how I saw it and got interested in it. So I wasn't actually doing anything with Lua. I wasn't actually having a hard time with like the C API or anything like that. I just decided it was time to, take this project and just throw energy into it, because why not? So I just picked up Sol and I started contributing to it, because I'd always done solo projects up until that point. Like, it was always just me, and sometimes maybe me and somebody else, but I never really did anything serious open source. I never really open sourced like the engine or the graphic stuff I've been working on. So I figured, hey, it's time to contribute to open source, right? It's time to put some energy in the, in the great big C++ ecosystem. It's time to be a real open source friendly freeware programmer, right? So that's how I got started with Sol2. There's no industry drive, no like project I was using it for. It was time to make Sol2 great. And that was it.
Since you mentioned industry and how Sol2 kind of has picked up a bit of a following, what types of industries and projects are currently using Sol2?
So at first nothing used Sol2. And then, and this is what kind of thing is coming full circle and all that, Jason Turner gave a...
I didn't do anything.
You sort of did. You sort of did. You gave a talk on ChaiScript, because you were, it's like selling ChaiScript at, in meetups and in places like that. And you did a comparison with Sol2, I believe, actually at C++ Now, like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, that was, how and why to add scripting to your project or something like that. Yes.
Yeah, so one of the things that resulted from that talk basically was that Jason kind of gave Sol2 like basically glowing praise, and so like a lot of stars and a lot of people just kind of jumped into the repository while I was still working on it, and just like all of a sudden I had all these issue requests of people seriously using Sol and Sol2 in like serious like actual real places. I actually didn't realize, it didn't occur to me how big it was getting until so there was a person who actually spoke at CppCon, whose name is Russian. I can't pronounce it, and I won't do him the terrible misjustice of butchering his name. But he was he came into the Gitter, because at the time I was supporting Sol2 with Gitter. Right now we have a Discord. I've kind of shut down the Gitter. But I sat down, and so this guy shows up in the Gitter and he just starts talking to me about Sol2, and he's like, hey, I wanted to ask a couple questions about the framework and how you support it and, the design decisions behind it, right? And so I talked with him, at the end of the conversation, he's like, great, this sounds like something that'd be really useful to use. And I'd be like, yeah, well, sure, if you use it, just let me know and all that stuff, right? And he's like, yeah, totally, we'll be using it. And I think he didn't tell me exactly what he'd be using it for, because it was like common knowledge that he was the head developer of the Multiple Arcade Machine Emulator project, or MAME. And so one day, how I figured it out was just one day I got an issue request about bit fields in Sol2. And he just talking about, hey, I have these bit fields and I want to bind them to sol2 and all this stuff, right? And so that's actually how I guess the user type _ bit fields example actually showed up in the examples directory. I figured out, I basically wrote up a small thing about, hey, this is how you would use bit fields as properties. All right, so I opened up an issue request came in that was asking about bit fields. I created an example about bit fields, and it was then that he kind of responded with what he was using it for, and he pointed me at the MAME project, at the MAME dev, and I saw it, and I was kind of flabbergasted that they had switched from using Vinnie Falco's Lua bridge, which has kind of been the thing that a lot of people use, especially in Russia, for Lua, and it turned out that they had switched to using sol2, kind of like overnight. And sure enough, I went into the, I was like, I couldn't believe it was happening, right? So I download, the MAME source code, right? I go through, they're like third party and license everything, and there it is, sol2's license, MIT license, blah, 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 copyright, wraps the PhD and contributors. And I was like, oh my God, it's real. It's happening. That's how I figured out it was even used in industry. And there were a couple of people who came to me before and who sent me like emails and stuff, or dropped me a message on the Lounge C++ who said things like, hey, I'm using sol2 for my work. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. But I didn't realize it was getting to the scale of like real industries with like lots and lots of issues and lots of users was using sol2. In fact, I think actually at one point, on your show previously, there was a guest you had, Elias Dallaire. He used sol2, and he, made like a blog post. He didn't talk about sol2, but he kind of called out sol2 as like a good framework or a good library to use. And I think he also talked about it on CppCast. And so another kind of wave of people came from that, especially a lot of game studios, because he started tweeting it a lot. And my once dead Twitter account kind of revived, and now I kind of, gave out like quick, fast support, and like a bunch of people, tweeted out that sol2 was amazing. And so like I just kept growing, and it's kept growing and growing. And now I believe it's at over 1,000 stars. I kind of can't believe it. And now it's just a thing that like a lot of people use. In fact, in the C++ Now talk I gave, there was a person there who was using sol2 in industry. Like just before my talk began, he told me like, hey, I'm actually using sol2 in industry. And I was like, wow, that's mind-boggling.
That's really cool.
I am curious what your future plans are for sol2 now.
Yeah, so, because I have users now, I can't, with my other projects, I can be like, oh yeah, I'm not going to work on this, or, I'm done with it, right? I've learned what I need to learn, right? So you can just kind of put the towel up and walk away. Can't do that anymore because I have users. And that's not bad, right? I'm super grateful for all the users. I mean, there's people who actually donated to like support me and my family with sol2. That's actually how I ate while I was at C++, at the C++ Now conference. I actually was able to eat because these people like donated to, the project. So that was actually fantastic.
Do you have a Patreon or anything set up?
I do not have a Patreon set up, but I do that at the buried at the bottom of my README for sol2. I've got like a link for donating. And I think it's also in like the docs page. I don't really publicize it all that much, and maybe I should, kind of have it at the top of the big banner, support sol2 or something, but I haven't quite gotten to selling out just yet. Maybe I should sell it just a little bit more, but yeah, totally. If somebody wants to support me and my family, totally. I mean, I'm a student. I'd like to have fancy dinners every now and then. That'd be cool. So please, drop $5, drop $10 in the PayPal link at the bottom. Maybe I should set up a real Patreon at some point in my life to, maybe people will be interested in that. But I feel like if I set up a Patreon, though, I'd be obligated to like update sol2 even more regularly than I do right now. I mean, I already close issues at the speed of, no issue that I can solve quickly stays open for more than like 24 or 48 hours. So, my level of support is kind of...
That's impressive. That's really impressive.
That is, yeah.
I think that's also kind of what helped the framework grow. After I kind of fixed the documentation and made it great, I also kind of put a lot of effort into really supporting people who showed up. And I think that had a very positive effect on, not only the numbers of people who used it, but the people who wanted to come back and keep using it. And I think that's also kind of what made people so kind of fanatical about, talking about Sol2 and selling it to other people. Feel free to drop some dollars there.
Yeah, and when you said, having a fancy dinner from time to time, since you are a student, I mean, you mean like Qdoba, you don't mean like the expensive steak place, probably.
No, yeah, just a little Chipotle, a nice Qdoba, maybe pick up some of that more expensive Chinese, rather than just the run-of-the-mill, fried rice. That'd be
not the $1 a scoop place, but the like $3 a scoop place.
Exactly, that kind of place, right? So that'd be super helpful. But no, I mean, it's not required. Sol2 is licensed under the MIT license. It's, there are companies using it right now, making bank, and, they don't have to pay me a dime, which is both great and kind of sad at the same time. But yeah, it's free for everybody to use, and I kind of like it that way. I want people to use it. I want people to push the boundaries of it, right? Because the C++ to Lua binding frameworks ocean is a very vast one, right? I made a recent blog post where I did a binding shootout between, like 14, 15 different frameworks, just for like binding things between C++ and Lua, from everything from Swig to like stuff that people never heard of. I wanted to kind of make Sol2 freely available because there was so much out there, and a lot of it had sometimes it had bad performance characteristics, and sometimes just had a very ugly interface. And so what I really wanted to do was push the envelope and then, make it freely available so that everybody could pick it up, right? And part of that is making it so that people can kind of learn what a great interface to I guess I'm bragging a little bit here, but what does a great interface to a binding library look like, and how you can achieve that on your own, and some of the things you can do with that. And that's actually a lot of it what my talk at C++ Now was about, right? How do you achieve this kind of great, framework and all that fun stuff?
And I will attest, it is a very clean, easy to use interface. It's definitely first class for your bindings.
Yeah, thank you.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about the work you're doing with the C++ committee? Are you going to Rapperswil this year?
Yes, I am totally going to Rapperswil, all on my own dime. It took me a lot of budgeting, but I finally figured out how I was going to do it. So I'm going to get out and take that 10, 12, maybe even be more, plane ride trip thing across the ocean to get to Rapperswil. I do not like traveling, so this is going to be really, really rough on me. Yeah, but so I'm going to go to Rapperswil. I am going to spend a lot of time basically soaking in the committee, right? Because it's going to be my first meeting. I've never been to a committee meeting. I don't have access to like the private reflector that is part of the committee. So, when I go there, I'll get access to the private C++ inner workings reflector. I'll kind of start getting to see what it's really like to standardize some things. And at that point, I'll also be kind of fighting to support my stood embed paper, which is a paper, it's been talked about a little bit, but it's a paper basically to allow somebody to take a resource from like the file system or whatever the implementation defines and embed it in your program at compile time and make it const_expr available, right? So it's available at compile time. You can static assert on some of the bytes and stuff like that. It builds on some previous work like the file string literals proposal by Andrew Tomazaz and a bunch of other stuff. Really, I'm just trying to push forward the state of the art here. Because this has kind of been a feature that's been asked for like 30 years in some form, and just nobody's really brought, some people have tried to bring a solution to it. The latest was, I guess, back in 2015 with Andrew Tomazon with file string literals. But before that, everybody kind of just settled into, I'll use, XXD/-I to, bake this into into a file that I can number and hashtag include in my thing and set it to a variable and then use it, and a bunch of other stuff that, was kind of messy. So there's been some real need for this. I think I can get into C++20, but it's going to be very difficult because there's a lot of things vying for the committee's attention right now, from modules to concepts to there's a huge amount of just things that people are trying to get into C++20 right now. And even right now, there's like the war raging between like Diet 2D graphics versus the 2D graphics proposal, and does it go in a TS or do we kill it now? And, all of these people are kind of like, standing, with their agendas ready and their guns loaded and ready to fire. And I'm just trying to sneak a proposal quietly through the committee so I can get some consensus on this and start making some forward progress. So yeah, it would have been a good idea to propose a couple meetings ago, a couple years ago. But after the file string literal proposal kind of it wasn't really like outright rejected, but they kind of discouraged it because they wanted to take a different direction, see some other things about it. The author just kind of didn't pick it up, right? So it kind of sat dormant until I wrote stood embed. So that's kind of just how that worked out.
It's definitely something I would like to see. It's something that anyone who's interested in embedded scripting or embedding resources in your project, and it would fit in nicely with the stuff that Ben and I talked about last year with context for JSON parsing. I would really like to see this embedded proposal go through.
Yeah, that's the hope. I really want to get this in. I mean, and there's tons of people who are like, and even at like the C++ users meeting for Boston, I went and I talked a little bit about stood embed, and people were like giving me high fives. They're like, yes, this is what we needed. We've been waiting for this, right? I sent it to the SG15 tooling mailing group, and everybody, and even Titus Winter said, JeanHeyd, this is like a great proposal. Like this is something we need, right? So there's clear consensus that we need it. It's just, is now the best time to fight for that to happen?
Well, if not now, I mean, we've got 5 years until the next standard, so I hope it gets through.
Yeah. You said you got, some positive feedback from a couple names you mentioned. Have you gotten any criticism that you're maybe trying to work in before you go to Rapperswell? Are you still working on the paper?
Oh, I got tons of criticism. And I've already completely addressed like most, if not all, of their concerns. There's actually a paper that came out in the last mailing that solves one of the biggest, I guess, brain farts of my proposal, which was, I say that, this is a constexpr function that's only supposed to be called at constexpr time. So I mark it constexpr, but constexpr doesn't actually enforce that the thing you call is like totally at compile time, right? It just says it can be used at compile time, not that it only should be. So, a few people, Andrew Sutton, David, Van der Voorde, and a bunch of, and one other person, proposed something called constexpr ! Which is a little bit hard to say. I don't know if you say it with like emphasis, right? So like constexpr, yeah, you're like excited about it. So constexpr is a paper that basically says, if you declare this function as constexpr, then you like totally mean it's constexpr. Like you're really emphatic about your constexpr-ness of this function, and so it only gets evaluated at compile time. And if you try to use it at runtime, the compiler is supposed to like spank you and say bad user, right? So that solves my problem, right? Because currently in my paper, I basically say, if you invoke this at runtime, then the behavior is unspecified. Woo! And like I wiggle my fingers like magically, right? But so David's paper solves that. Since I'm going to Rapperswell, I'm totally going to help him out with his paper. And while I'm also there, I'll be helping a little bit out with SG16 and Unicode papers. We've got a couple papers in flight for that to kind of make sure that we really, really, really get some of the core basic, like bog standard basic things about Unicode in the standard, so that we, when C++20 rolls by, we'll basically have all the leeway we need to actually make like full Unicode a realization in the standards, because we need to with the update references to the Unicode standard, right? We need to actually sneak a reference to like the Unicode standard into the C++ so that we have leeway to actually reference it and use it when we define normalization and collation and all these other things that we need. So there's a lot of things that I'm going to be kind of doing in Rapperswell. It's basically going to be Rapperswell is beautiful, kind of like C++ Now is beautiful, but I was kind of there as a volunteer and there to do work. So I'm going to be going to Rapperswell. I'm going to be there to do work and there to, get things done and push these things through.
It will certainly be a lot of work, I'm sure. I am curious, this proposal that you mentioned with the const expr exclamation point, does that allow for overloading on const expr also? Do you know?
So I do not believe it allows overloading on const expr, but there is another paper that does, and that one is called Const expr Parameters by David Stone. That one looks a little bit dicey and spicy for me. I'm not sure if the committee is going to go for it. So, I mean, I think I'll talk to David Stone if he's there about it. And, you know, because I mean, I like the proposal, right? I like what it says that, you know, it allows you to do, right? You know, and if you have the const expr parameters paper, you can actually do things like have a tuple and then like use the square bracket access and like put 0, and like that totally gets you the first tuple, and like it knows what to do and everything, right? So that would be like that's like the dream syntax, right, for tuples and everything else, right? So const expr parameters are like, that's some sweet stuff, but it's also spicy stuff. And, you know, I don't know how core and, you know, the library evolution working groups or evolution work group is going to take to it. So, you know, I'm going to watch that one, carefully. And if they get some support, then I'm totally going to like throw my weight behind it and be like, all right, let's do this. Yeah. But, you know, if that's not the case, that's just how it, we'll see how it shakes out.
Right.
Okay. Well, it's been great having you on the show today, JeanHeyd. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we let you go?
Not particularly. Oh, well, I guess I could kind of talk a little bit about my lightning talk, the first lightning talk I gave on Monday. So this is kind of going backwards a little bit, and I'm sorry for jumping around a little bit, but
that's fine.
I gave the first lightning talk I gave, like I said, it was non-technical. And I think actually Bunny LaDame actually talks about that in her trip report. But the talk I gave was about you're glad you are here, right? And so it was, you know, it's 5 minutes, right? So I can't go through the whole story, but I talked a little bit about, you know, how I was always kind of an outsider, as far as like growing up in my community and everything else, and where I lived, right? So when I was born, I was born in Jersey, and I was born, you know, in a nice, you know, like suburb. I grew up in a nice, like, suburban house, right? You know, surrounded mostly by, you know, very affluent people, and, you know, I wasn't very affluent and all that fun stuff. So growing up in these neighborhoods, it was kind of difficult because, you know, I was black, right? You know, there's always this question of, you know, you know, how black are you really, right? And stuff like that. And, you know, I talked a little bit about that, and then I also talked about, you know, when I finally did leave New Jersey, and, you know, I started living in Boston, you know, and that was home, and I went to the public schools there. You know, I was too white to be in the public school, right? So I talked a little bit about that and what it was like, you know, being in that like dichotomy of, you know, okay, so, you know, I'm too black to be part of the suburban white community. I'm too white to be part of the black urban community. You know, where do I belong? What does it mean? And what I've really found is that, you know, I just want to be part of a community that's intelligent and smart and has nice people in it that don't factor my skin color in. And I've really found that a lot of that in, you know, open source development and on these online communities like SG16 and with, you know, the Lounge and other places like that. You know, they don't really judge me, you know. I mean, sort of it because, you know, they don't see my face, right? But even when I go to places like C++ Now, which was, you know, that was my first time going to a C++ conference or any of that, I wasn't judged on my skin color. Nobody, you know, that wasn't a sticking point for anybody, right? You know, whereas it's been a sticking point in other places. And so I was super glad to find a place where I finally, where it was just, you know, I was judged as a merits on being a human being and not, you know, I was a human being first, an engineer and a programmer second, and then everything kind of fell in after that, right? You know, nobody judged me, you know, oh, you're black, you know, gotta make that a sticking point, you know, number one first, right? So it was fantastic that I was able to see this, in, you know, the conferences and all that stuff, right? And so I haven't had an amazing amount of industry experience, right? So I don't know what industry is going to be like for me when I get there, but, you know, if it's anything like the conferences or things like that I've been to, I'm really going to like it being a programmer. Yeah.
I certainly hope it is.
I was just going to say, yeah, I hope it's so as well. And it's comforting to hear that you had such a good experience with the C++ community. at the conferences and everything.
Yeah, and I kind of just want to, I wanted to, the reason why I ended up giving that lightning talk and why I kind of want to talk a little bit about it now is because, there's a lot of places where people feel like before they even get through the door, they feel like they don't belong. And, obviously, the programming community is one of those that kind of has a lens on it that's not very accepting to, people of color or women. And, I can't speak to the female experience here. But, for the person of color experience, I've so far been lucky that I haven't, encountered, some, massive, jerk, basically, right? I haven't encountered that yet. And so if you are, if you're, not even if you're a person of color, right? If you're poor like I was, if you're, just, somebody who doesn't think that they'd fit in, these programmer communities, I would really encourage you to just jump in, right? Go to a user meeting, through meetup.com or wherever else you want to check, to find these places and just go, just experience it, right? Because there's a lot of good for every singular bad person there might be. There's a lot of good people in the world, and you really, really should reach out and touch those people because those are the people that are really going to make your time at C++ Now or in the lounge or SG16 or wherever it is a fantastic place to be. And so if you're listening to this, I really, really, really encourage you to just reach out, just go for what's in your heart, go for the passion, go and execute on the passion that you have for these things. Yeah. So sorry, I have a little bit of calling out and shilling, I guess, but I felt I should do a little bit of that at least. Yeah.
Not a problem.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's been great having you on the show today. Obviously, people can find sol2. I'm guessing that's on GitHub. Where can people find you online?
So I totally have a LinkedIn. I totally have a Twitter, like at the Phantom Derp. I totally didn't explain how I got that nickname, but maybe
that's all right.
Maybe you can ask me on Twitter about it. I totally managed to do it. So I mentioned this in my talk on sol2 at C++ Now, but I totally managed to snag the LinkedIn handle, ThePhD. So if you type in /the_PhD after your LinkedIn URL, you will totally find me. It's mine, yes. I couldn't get it on Twitter. I got it on GitHub. I couldn't get it on Twitter, but I have it on LinkedIn, and so that's totally how you find me. And one day it'll be absolutely true. I will totally have a doctorate, and I'll totally have my name. I'm gonna totally fill out my stood promise on my nickname and get that all squared away. So, totally find me there. You can always, of course, reach me. My email is all over all of my commits. I don't know if that's a good or a bad idea, but it's there, and you can find me there and all that fun stuff. So I look forward to hearing about all of you and your programming adventures and things you want to do on Twitter and maybe on LinkedIn or wherever else. So, yeah.
Okay, great. It's been great having you on the show today.
Yeah, it's been great meeting you too.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for listening in as we chat about C++. I'd love to hear what you think of the podcast. Please let me know if we're discussing the stuff you're interested in. Or if you have a suggestion for a topic, I'd love to hear about that too. You can email all your thoughts to feedback@CppCast.com. I'd also appreciate if you like CppCast on Facebook and follow CppCast on Twitter. You can also follow me at Rob W. Irving and Jason at LeftKiss on Twitter. And of course, you can find all that info and the show notes on the podcast website at CppCast.com. Theme music for this episode is provided by podcastthemes.com. Podcast website at CppCast.com. Theme music for this episode is provided by podcastthemes.com.